poisoned in terms of asthma and in terms of other conditions. And in another role, I was asked to look at what happens, how do we deal with that structural racism that is pervasive, that we haven't really made a dent on despite all of our efforts. And I came up with a legal theory that's now gaining traction, but it's underwritten by an odd notion that I'll share. What I've said is that we know how to keep kids in school. We know how to enable every kid to learn how to read. We know from the youth courts that I've founded that we can, in fact, reduce recidivism from 34% to 6% by having teenagers talk to teenagers. We know how to keep kids who are bipolar and schizophrenic out of institutions when the families use time banking to form an extended family that copes with those problems. We know how to enlist seniors to help other seniors so that they can remain in community as contributing and vibrant members. We know how to do those things. We know how to help people who are coming out of prison feel that they have a place and a value even if nobody will hire them. And in Washington, D.C., Chris has organized and been responsible for shaping what we call a Homecomers Academy, where people coming home get up every morning at 6:30 to provide safe passage for kids across gang territory. We know how to do those things. What we don't know how to do is to get officials to use knowledge. That's a really radical idea, to stop doing what doesn't work and what perpetuates those disparities. And so the legal theory is that if officials are formally put on notice through a public notice forum, and we've done that now in Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C., if they're formally put on notice both of the disparity that their present practices produce and the existence of alternatives that work and that save money and that have been validated and that reduce racial disparity, then if they go back to prior practice, going back to business as usual becomes an intentional decision to perpetuate racial disparity, and that gives rise to litigation under the Civil Rights Act and under Section 1983. So part of what we're going to have to do is get officials to make use of the knowledge that's in this room, because I think that the perpetuation of practices that threaten the survival of the species ought to be looked at a little bit more closely, and they ought to have an obligation to use the knowledge that we have, not simply to come to meetings and not simply to smile and say yes and then go back to business as usual. With that said, let me simply say that I consider time banking as just an instrument, like money is just an instrument. That I talked about the core values, the algorithms, because they're more basic than the tool. And I say to people, if use of the tool gets in the way, stick with the values. Make sure that what you're doing advances those values. If the tool helps you, that's great. If it doesn't help you, if it gets in the way, that's okay too. But we need to deal with the fact that our monetary system does not value the things that we need as a species to survive, and the sustainability depends upon our willingness, in fact, to understand that we are, in fact, a species that needs to look after and value each other in a different kind of way. And in that context, when I got tired, frankly, of writing grant proposals, I decided to write a sort of meditation on what I call time banking mathematics. And it goes this way. We take halting steps, one by one by one, and our math is simple. 1 equals 1 equals 1. 1 is tiny, the smallest absolute, but absolute is absolute. To be human is what we do and what we are, to care, to love, to reach out, to come to each other's rescue, to grieve, to celebrate, to reach consensus, to stand up for what's right, to stand against what we know is wrong. These are not acquired, they are in our DNA. Family, loved ones, justice, democracy, our planet, all that is holy, not for sale at market price, at any price. 1 hour is our piece of eternity, fleeting but nonetheless precious, sacred, eternal. That is what time banking means, declares, affirms, and reaffirms. We are and we will not be diminished. Let it be. I'm more than happy to answer questions or just to talk, because you all are engaged in a very, very special undertaking, I think. Trying to make the inquiry about sustainability is so, so important. I was once asked, and I teach a course. I teach a course called Law and Justice, and people have asked me, well, what's your definition of justice? And so, like, what's your definition of sustainability? And I have to share with them what my father taught me. He said, I don't know what justice is. I think it's too absolute a concept, too perfect a concept. But I think we were all born with a capacity to respond to injustice. And so he defined justice as the process of either preventing or remedying whatever would arouse our sense of injustice. And I think that sustainability is really a matter of responding to whatever arouses our sense and our awareness of our fragility on this planet, in this universe. And that's how I view sustainability. And the pursuit of that is something that is unending. We're on that journey, and I deeply respect all of you for being on that journey.
We didn't actually have anything planned after Edgar spoke. So we're ad hocing right now. The first sort of little bit of ad hocery I'd like to do is to just say from both of us, I'm Edgar's wife, if you didn't guess that already. Is just a huge, huge thank you. Today has been the most incredibly rich day. We've heard so many. I was just scribbling and scribbling and scribbling and scribbling, and scribbling through each of those panels today. And we want to just flag to Marie Nelson, where is she? There. Who is she wasn't kidding when she said she was persistent. We really know this is a persistent lady. And there are other time bankers whose names I won't call out, I won't do shout-outs right now, but I will shout out for time banking in the Tampa Bay area. And it's a thrill to see what you're doing. I also do want to do a quick shout-out for Tony Budak, who came in all the way from Ohio to be here today. So, if there are any questions for Edgar, we would love to just take a few questions, but if you're all actually just deadbeat at this point in time and you'd like to turn it in for the night, we're quite happy to do that too. So we'll just take a few seconds. If any hands go up, that'll be great. If not, we're fine.
I just want to hear again the definition of justice. That was really very, very, very cool.
Justice is the process of either remedying or preventing that which would arouse our sense of injustice.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi. What is the name of the course you are teaching?
We teach, Edgar and I, Edgar started a law school, as you probably heard, which was the Antioch School of Law and is now the UDC David A. Clark School of Law, which is the public school of law for the District of Columbia. And Edgar teaches actually every entering class. He teaches a class called Law and Justice. And it's the most brilliant thing. And he turns everybody on to justice in a big way. And he and I, no, I'm on board right now. He and I actually together teach a class called System Change, and we teach that to the LLMs, that's the clinical law professors. And it's extremely exciting because they are beginning to look at whole systems thinking to see how to use law as a tool for system change and for making real change in society. So we love teaching that class.
The name of that class again?
Law and systems change.
Thank you.
Welcome. Oh, there's a hand at the back.
These, I mean, I really appreciate you talking. You're a great communicator. And as I was taking notes, I mean, these things to me go down to human nature to a really deep level. In a world that's like driven by data, I mean, PE ratios, companies have been trained here to support the HCC. I know they have to respond to stockholder demands on performance from a money standpoint. But what you're talking about is like a sea change against this whole movement towards inexorable change, towards information technology, data, metrics applied to everything, the dehumanizing aspects of that. I mean, how are you making inroads on a national basis to address this, it seems like, movement towards everything being measured and everything being analyzed, overanalyzed, and just dehumanizing value, like you said so eloquently? I mean, it's just powerful what you're talking about, but how are you instituting that change on a national basis?
Well, that's a brilliant question, because we couldn't have created time banking before the era of personal computers. If I had to look at index cards to find somebody who's available within my zip code who would walk my dog Tuesday night because I'm in the hospital, and who spoke Portuguese and could climb the stairs, I'd be in trouble. Now I can find that, if I have got that database, I can find that in a nanosecond. We started off with DBase, then FoxPro, and then we went to Access, and then we went to Drupal, and so it's now on the internet and available. In 2 months, it will be available in a new version on smartphones, so that we'll be able to reweave community in another kind of way. But the real question becomes, how do we begin to get that used on scale? Because we're really saying, how do we alert people to the externalities that come from a fiscal monoculture? We know what a monoculture does with agriculture, how fragile it makes an economy. And if that crop goes down, everything goes down. Well, we're living in a fiscal monoculture, and we saw what happened when things crashed. Everything crashed. And the insanity of living in a community where you've got the same capacity, the same machinery, the same needs, and no way of putting supply and demand together, because you don't have a medium of exchange that puts supply and demand together, and it's crashed, and you're dependent on that and only that to enable people to get together. So we're hoping that the new version and interaction with Facebook, as some time banks are using it, that we can begin to use the social media and software to begin to create a wave that goes forward. And the other thing is, I have to say that, I spent the first third of my life getting ready for the second third of my life. Nobody helped me get ready for the third third of my life. And I think that those of us in education needs to think of can there be a formal vehicle that deals with the competencies needed both to create a different kind of legacy for future generations, because we as elders have to be in a stewardship role and have to understand what it means to be stewards of what we're passing on and what we're trying to create. But all that means is what's happening here is very important if it's the seedbed of that kind of inquiry.
When I'm up here, I get my say, so. Okay, so I think that I would like to augment what Edgar just said by saying that we are sowing a meme. We are sowing a way of thinking, a way of looking at the world. And we know from talking with people who are doing time banking or have explored time banking and really taken it into themselves, that it's actually like taking a picture, a snapshot of the world and sort of deliberately blurring it a little bit. It's like everything changes a little bit. And when you sit in that changed way, and I know, Tony, I know you know this, and I know Marie knows this, I know that people who've done this know it's like, wow, everything looks a little bit different from this perspective. And that's what we're trying to do actually, is get it so that people are going, wow, everything looks a little bit different from this perspective. And then start connecting the dots. And I'll just say one more thing, was we were at an organization recently called Family Matters, which is paid to provide services to families and elders and so on in Washington, D.C. And this speaks to the data thing and the money thing and all the things. They said, we are paid to provide units of service. And it's our deal that we do provide exactly no more than the units of service we're paid to provide, and exactly no less. We are efficient. And they said, and what you're doing does not fit. And but they also said, but we also know it's extraordinarily important. So what do we do? And it's, you know, this is the dilemma that we're in, and these are the dilemmas that communities are facing with everywhere. What we're doing does not quite fit all of our needs, and so how do we find ways that are not fitting to meet the needs that are not fitting? And time banking, I think, is one way to stimulate the thinking around that. Even if it doesn't go into action, it actually stimulates a tremendous amount of thought around that. Any other questions? Oh, one more. Yeah.
I have a question. I work with military veterans at a VA hospital. I wonder if you've done any work with VAs.
So, that's a great question. So, about a year ago, we got a call from somebody called the Innovation Unit of the VA, Veterans Administration. Said, we rather like the idea of time banking and we'd like to take it into practice. What do you think? So Edgar went into gear with them and talked it up a storm, and they said, yes, this all sounds wonderful. The wheels of government turn very, 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 very.
But there are psychiatrists in the hospital, in the VA hospital in Miami, who have said they think they're not only ready, but they think it could make a real contribution in dealing with PTSD. That the whole question of how one shifts a person's focus from the past to a sense of value in the present and the future, and how one continues a career where service as a mission is central to their sense of being. That time banking really responds to that, and that veterans bring all kinds of abilities that nobody understands and recognizes, but that the time bank would be able to mobilize in different kinds of ways. So we're also meeting with homeless vets in Washington, D.C., and we've held focus groups, and they have said they wanted to go forward with it. Chris is right, the government moves slowly, but we are ready to move with them as fast as they can.
So I have to give you a quick story about this. So we did go to Miami, and we met with veterans in Miami, and there were about 60 veterans in the room, and we actually broke into 3 groups. And each of us did something slightly different. And in my group, each group had to report out. So we hadn't got through all the things, so I just handed over to my group and I said, you decide what you're going to report out. And it was incredibly moving, actually. It was, the room just became, you could hear a pin drop. Because what they each said, some of them had been in prison because they had actually gone off the rails when they came back. Some of them were seriously disabled in my group. And what they wanted to do, he stood up, this veteran stood up, who'd been in prison, who'd been on drugs. He said, we sincerely want to help others. We sincerely want to help the women in our lives. We know we have given them a hard time. We know that we can't give them the support they need. We would like to collectively address the problems that we as individuals know that having come back from service, we know we create. It was a very touching, moving moment. It was so powerful. And unfortunately, we do not have the resources to go in and help those veterans fulfill that vision. It was, and that veteran who spoke so powerfully to the whole room, I mean, it was so quiet, people were just focused on him, the way he was so eloquent. He told me afterwards he has never ever in his life before actually stood up and spoken before a group of people. It was a natural gift that he had, and it came both as his own talent and also his passion. So to make it happen would be such a genius thing, and right now we're just waiting for some resources to be gathered to make that happen.
They're the ones who have to carry it forward and be trained. It's not for us to do to them. It's for us to share the tool with a cadre of them who can then take the leadership.
Okay. Well, there's one more, and then we will end it.
Would you talk somehow, please, about where Time Banks has been most successful in care areas around the country and around the world, and some of your most compelling stories about time banking and exchanges and how it's been able to impact on social services?
Okay. All right. So we will. So actually, I want to say before Edgar jumps in again, because I'm at the microphone. That is such a huge, huge question. So we will just answer very, very briefly. I've been involved with time banking only 15 years, and every day is a new kind of opening. I'll hand over to Edgar for that.
Well, we've seen studies that say it's impacted significantly in an HMO context on mental health, and radically reduced the rate at which mental health deteriorated with a population that was aging in terms of a study that was done. We've seen it in New York City, where there was an extensive study of time banking, and 100% of the seniors said that it had changed their life, it had changed, they had met people whom they never would have met before. They felt that they could stay and remain in community. They felt they saved money. They felt that but most of all, they felt useful, and they felt that they still had something to give. In the youth court, which we started with time banking, where teenagers who had been arrested came before a jury of teenagers with authority from the court to sentence those kids. We saw kids, frankly, who were failing in school, who had been in trouble, who had been arrested. We saw their lives change. We saw them go on to college, and we saw recidivism drop from 34% to 6%. And we saw how they began to show the leadership and the natural leadership they had to create a different kind of peer culture. We see with, I guess, the folks in Rhode Island, we see parents whose kids are schizophrenic, bipolar, and have autism, who otherwise would be taken away. We haven't seen a single kid taken away in all the years that time bank has been going on. I just, when I was in England, I saw they were using a paper currency where a person said to me, for the first time, I use up all my money so that my kids and my wife can go to a swimming pool. Now I can go with them because